80% of funding for 80% of the school boards conducted what they called evaluation, and 24% conducted what they called in-depth research. And there are some excellent examples across the country of school boards that are involved in research. But mainly it's evaluation, and it's mainly based on students' engagement. Educators know what that looks like, and they can identify that. The research is mainly teachers who are going on to do graduate studies and are using the school population as their subject group. So when it comes to research in arts and learning, in most venues, including education, it's still highly anecdotal, dependency on anecdote. And that's very heartwarming and it's very important, but there's very little real in-depth, high-level research, I would say, going on. By high level, I mean it would meet the levels of academia and be of use to programmers. The categories on the left chart that indicate funding are not surprising. We suspect that grants and government overlap in terms of how educators are thinking about their money coming in to fund their arts and learning. However, we were a little surprised at donations and services in kind still being quite high, and that's encouraging, but we also wondered whether that meant that artists are again being asked to do what they're so often are being asked to do. And we heard in our keynote to work at a level of reimbursement that's below what they should receive, or to ask to provide their services for free. And that's not true of every situation, but we're wondering, we suspect it's still widespread. When we look at what school boards are asking in terms of dollars needed to move forward their arts and learning agenda, we discovered that the asks were quite small. For example, schools ask for $5,000 generally. School boards ask for anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000 to have arts and learning in their schools. We don't think that these are very large amounts. I think they're easily accommodated, especially when you compare it to other findings for expenditures of the public purse. So somehow we have to reach people with the message of how important this is. The education sector identified several roles for CNAL, and the first one was research. Disseminate original Canadian research in arts and learning. And there is some out there, but there's not a whole lot. And this isn't surprising because educational innovation and change is usually based on research, educational research. So we need that as well as people who can deliver the programming. The next two categories, promoting awareness of the contribution of the arts to leading happy, healthy, productive lives, and being a voice for the arts and learning sector, are really about advocacy. We need more advocacy in this field.
I'm going to review some of the findings for arts organizations. The first one is that 93% of the responding organizations have arts and learning as part of their mandate. 67% of them provide community access to arts and learning and training in the arts. 38% have in-school learning in and through the arts as part of their mandate. Sector served through funding. We can see that arts organizations offer both community and school-based arts and learning experiences and work with groups and individuals, again, across the lifespan. Venues. Classrooms are not the main venue for arts and learning experiences delivered by organizations. In-house experiences occur more often than in schools. And then there is a mix of venues, including in-house and community-based works. I know sometimes there's difficulties in getting students out of schools, but that is managing to be done. Sources of funding for arts organizations. Grants, as you can see, are the single largest source of funding for arts organizations providing arts and learning. Organizations in the sector are, of course, mostly not-for-profits, and have always derived much of their funding from grants. The artists involved may be highly trained, are highly trained in their art forms, but the indication that from our, indicates that the organizations perhaps require additional and or specialized training to augment the expertise that the artists already have. 58% of arts organizations surveyed engage in evaluation of programming. Only 20% engage in in-depth research, and that tends to be program-specific as opposed to, say, something sector-wide or dealing with larger issues. 15% of the organizations funded are able to meet the request for funding, which is a pretty small percentage. And again, the amount they indicate they need, $50,000, is relatively modest. Again, with individual artists, arts organizations highlighted a number of potential roles for CNAL. Interestingly enough, the top 3 are very close. To be a voice for the arts and learning sector, provide information about the benefits, and disseminate original Canadian research. We're going to speak very briefly about funders, although we made extensive efforts to contact funders of arts and learning. We had very small response, so we're not going to spend too much time on that, but we just wanted to indicate that funders provide professional development for arts and learning. 80% of them identify that. Again, funders, in terms of their ability to meet requests, 40% are and 60% aren't. And again, for potential goals for CNAL, they're all quite high, and I think indicates a strong need for CNAL, and that the need for CNAL to identify which priorities it needs to focus on is there. And then I will both do some sort of summary comments for you, and Dan will start with that.
So that was a galloping run through 7 months of trying to gather data. What we feel we've provided is a snapshot of some of the current activities in arts and learning. Indeed, we had 2 goals when we conducted this research: to provide this snapshot of what's going on in the sector, the second was to determine the needs of the sector, including what roles CNAL might play in meeting those needs. So, part of the snapshot, there's a large amount of activity occurring outside of schools in arts and learning, more and more. Lifelong learning is increasing and becoming considered very important. There's a recognition of the broader needs for arts and learning, including arts and learning for special needs groups. And again, that all groups, I think, are special needs because they're living within their own contexts. But these were the groups we used, really indicated that artists need more expertise in respectfully delivering arts and learning. In schools, of course, there's a high percentage, or the complete percentage of 100% of activity connected with attaining curriculum goals. And again, that doesn't seem to be such a source of conflict as it used to be, say, even 10 years ago. For artists, there's a diminishing reliance on public funders and more reliance on fees for service. So artists are becoming more entrepreneurial. Artists feel undervalued by Canadian society. We hoped that this would change, that artists felt valued, but we're finding that they still, I think it was something like 60% said that they felt, or 64% said that they felt they were not valued, and another 20% or so said that they weren't sure they were valued as important members of Canadian society. So there's a task in itself. And Stephen will give some concluding comments, and we'll have some time for some questions.
Thanks, Anne. My concluding comments are just a few points about some of the needs that were identified in this study. The first one is that the need for increased funding is relatively modest. The need for original Canadian research and access to that research was strong, and that more professional development needs were consistent across various populations surveyed. And finally, there are several, in fact, one could say many potential important roles for CNAL to play in the sector, and CNAL will have to prioritize those as it moves forward, because there's too many for them to meet all at once. So, as Anne said, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Katie, is that